This is a short story by Guy de Maupassant from a collection translated by Roger Colet. This story is called A Ruse. A Ruse. The old doctor and his young patient were chatting by the fire. She was not really ill, but merely suffering from one of those feminine ailments which often afflict pretty women. A touch of nerves, a little anemia, and a hint of fatigue. That fatigue which a newly married couple normally experience at the end of their first month of married life, when they have made a love match. She was lying on her couch and talking. "No, doctor," she said, "I shall never be able to understand a woman deceiving her husband. Even supposing that she doesn't love him, that she takes no notice of her promises and vows, how can she bear to give herself to another man? How can she conceal what she's doing from other people's eyes? How can she find it possible to love in the midst of lies and treachery?" The doctor smiled. "Oh, that's easy. I can assure you that a woman doesn't think about all those little niceties when she takes it into her head to stray off the straight and narrow path. I'd go further and say that no woman is ripe for true love until she has gone through all the promiscuities and disappointments of married life, which, according to a famous man, is nothing but an exchange of bad tempers during the day and bad smells during the night. Nobody ever spoke a truer word, for no woman can love passionately until she has been married. If I might compare her to a house, she's uninhabitable until her husband has dried out the plaster. As for dissimulation, every woman can provide plenty of that on such occasions. The simplest of women are wonderful liars, and can extricate themselves from the most difficult dilemmas with a skill bordering on genius. The young woman seemed reluctant to believe him. "No, doctor," she said. "Nobody ever thinks of what he ought to have done in a dangerous situation until after it's over, and women are certainly more liable than men to lose their heads in such circumstances." The doctor threw up his hands. "After it's over, you say? We men only get our inspiration after the event, that's true. But you women, look here, let me tell you something that happened to one of my patients, whom I'd always regarded as a woman of impeachable virtue. It happened in a provincial town. One night when I was fast asleep, in that deep first sleep which is so difficult to disturb, I had the impression, in my dreams, that all the bells in the town were sounding the fire alarm. Suddenly I woke up. It was my own doorbell which was ringing wildly. As my manservant didn't seem to be answering it, I, in my turn, pulled the bell at the head of my bed, and soon the sound of banging doors and hurrying footsteps disturbed the silence of the sleeping house. Then Jean appeared and handed me a letter which said, "Madame Lelièvre begs Dr. Siméon to come to her house at once." I thought for a few moments and then said to myself, "Nerves. A fit of hysterics, something of that sort. I'm too tired." So I replied, "Dr. Simeon is ill and asks Madame Lelièvre to be good enough to send for his colleague, Monsieur Bonnet." I sent this note off in an envelope and went back to sleep. Half an hour later the doorbell went again, and Jean came to tell me, "There is somebody downstairs. I don't know whether it's a man or a woman he's so well wrapped up, who would like to see you straight away. He says it's a matter of life and death for two people." I sat up in bed, told Jean to show the caller in, and waited. A sort of black phantom appeared, who raised her veil as soon as Jean had left the room. It was Madame Berthe Lelièvre, a young woman who had been married for 3 years to a large shopkeeper in the town and was considered the prettiest girl in the province. She was terribly pale, her face twitching with panic and her hands trembling violently. Twice she tried to speak without being able to utter a sound. At last she managed to stammer, Quick, doctor, come quick. My lover has just died in my bedroom." She stopped, choking with emotion, then went on, My husband will be coming home from the club soon." I jumped out of bed without even thinking that I was in my nightshirt and got dressed in a few seconds. Then I said, "Was it you who came a little while ago?" "No," she murmured, standing there like a statue, petrified with fear. That was my maid. She knows." Then after a pause she went on, I stayed by his side." A sort of terrible cry of horror came from her lips, and after a fit of choking which made her gasp for breath, she burst into tears, weeping helplessly and shaking with sobs for a minute or two. Then her tears suddenly stopped, as if dried up by an inner fire, and resuming her air of tragic calm, she said, "Let's hurry." I was ready, but I exclaimed, "Heavens! I forgot to order my carriage." "I have one," she said. "It's his carriage, which was waiting for him." She wrapped herself up, covering her face completely, and we set off. When she was beside me in the darkness of the carriage, she suddenly seized my hand, and crushing it in her delicate fingers, she said quaveringly in a voice which came from her broken heart, "Oh, if only you knew, if only you knew how I'm suffering. I've been in love with him, madly in love with him, for the past 6 months." "Is anybody at your house?" I asked. "No," she replied. "Nobody except Rose, who knows everything." We stopped in front of the door. As she had said, everybody was obviously asleep. We let ourselves in with a latchkey without making any noise and tiptoed upstairs. The frightened maid was sitting on the floor at the top of the stairs with a lighted candle beside her, as she had not dared to stay with the dead man. I went into the bedroom, which was turned upside down as if there'd been a struggle in it. The bed was crumpled and open and seemed to be waiting for somebody. One of the sheets was hanging down to the carpet, and wet towels with which they had bathed the young man's temples were lying on the floor beside a basin under glass. A peculiar smell of kitchen vinegar mingled with whiffs of perfume filled the room. The corpse was lying full length on its back in the middle of the room. I went up to it, looked at it, touched it. I opened the eyes and felt the hands, and then, turning to the 2 women who were shivering as if they were freezing, I said, "Help me to lift him onto the bed." After we'd laid him out gently, I listened to his heart and held a mirror to his lips. Then I murmured, "It's all over. Let's dress him quickly." It was a terrible business. I took his limbs one by one, like those of an enormous doll, and held them out to the clothes the women brought. Like that, we put on his socks, underpants, trousers, and waistcoat, and finally we managed to put on his coat, although we had a great deal of trouble getting his arms into the sleeves. When it came to buttoning his boots, the 2 women knelt down while I held the light. His feet were slightly swollen, so this was extremely difficult, and as they were unable to find a button hook, they had to use their hairpins. As soon as the horrible business of dressing the corpse was over, I inspected our handiwork and said, "You ought to tidy up his hair." The maid went and fetched her mistress's brush and comb, but as she was trembling and kept pulling out the long tangled hairs without meaning to, Madame Lelièvre snatched the comb out of her hand and arranged the dead man's hair, as if she were caressing it. She made a fresh parting, brushed the beard, and slowly rolled the ends of the moustache round her fingers, as she had probably been used to be doing in the familiarities of love. All of a sudden, letting go of his hair, she grasped her lover's inert head and gazed for a long time in despair at the dead face which could no longer smile at her. Then, throwing herself onto him, she clasped him in her arms and kissed him passionately. Her kisses fell like blows on the closed lips, on the dead eyes, on the temples and the forehead. And then, putting her lips to his ear, as if he could still hear her, and she were about to whisper something to make their embraces still more ardent, she repeated several times in a heart-rending voice, "Goodbye, darling." Just then the clock struck midnight, and I gave a start. "Good grief," I said, 12 o'clock. That's the time the club closes. Come, madame, we've no time to lose." She got to her feet, and I said, "Let's carry him into the drawing room." The three of us carried him there, and I sat him on a sofa and lit the candelabra. The front door opened and shut with a bang. The husband was already back. I said, "Rose, quick, bring me the towels and basin and tidy up the bedroom. Hurry, for goodness sake. Monsieur Lelièvre has just come home." I heard his steps coming upstairs and along the corridor. His hands were feeling the walls in the dark. "Come in here, my dear fellow," I called out. "We've had an accident." The astonished husband appeared in the doorway with a cigar in his mouth. "What's the matter?" he asked. "What's the meaning of this?" "My dear chap," I said, going up to him, "you find us in something of a spot. I had stayed here late, chatting with your wife and our friend here, who'd brought me in his carriage. Well, all of a sudden he collapsed, and in spite of all our efforts, he has remained unconscious for the last 2 hours. I didn't want to call in any strangers, and, well, if you'll help me to get him downstairs, I'll be able to attend him much better in his own house." The husband, who was surprised but completely unsuspecting, took off his hat. Then he took hold of his henceforth inoffensive rival under the armpits. I got between the legs like a horse between the shafts, and we went downstairs, with the wife now holding the light. When we got outside, I held the corpse up and spoke to it encouragingly so as to deceive the coachman. "Come now, old fellow," I said. "It's nothing. You feel better already, don't you? Buck up now, come on, make an effort. It'll soon be over." As I could feel that the body was on the point of collapsing and slipping out of my hands, I gave it a shove, which sent it tumbling into the carriage. Then I got in after it. Monsieur Lelièvre asked me anxiously, "Do you think it's anything serious?" I replied, "No," with a smile, and looked at his wife. She had put her arm into that of her lawful husband and was staring into the dark interior of the carriage. I shook hands with them and told the coachman to start. During the whole journey, the dead man kept falling against my right side. When we got to his house, I said that he had lost consciousness on the way, and I helped to carry him upstairs. There I certified that he was dead, and acted another comedy for the benefit of the distracted family. At last I got back to bed, not without cursing all lovers. The doctor stopped, still smiling, and the young woman asked him with a shudder, "Why did you tell me that horrible story?" He gave her a gallant bow and answered, "So as to offer you my services in case of need." The end.